One Piece is about family, but not in the way that you might expect. Plenty of shows about family already exist, like The Simpsons or American Dad, shows which make an exhibition out of the flaws and failures of the family unit with the help of some dark comedy. These shows are marketed primarily to people who, more often than not, lead less than happy lives with the goal of making the time they spend more palatable. Shows like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos do the same thing in reverse. You get to see the private fantasies of midlife lunacy play out in real time as husbands and wives betray each other for the sake of personal reward, for the sake of things like wealth, fame, and power. Indeed, One Piece is full of stories like these. Tragic comedies about families who fail each other and betray each other, but they don't all have a sad ending. In Whole Cake Island, when the mafioso father of crime Capone Gang Bedge came up with a scheme to assassinate the Emperor Big Mom, on the day of her daughter's wedding no less, it seemed like one of these two pirates was destined for defeat. And after all, this plan to kill one of the strongest beings in the world failed. That very same day, however, Bedge changed his mind about trying to kill Big Mom and instead helped her to eat the wedding cake that she had been fantasizing about for days. Capone Bedge's desire to protect the family he loved outweighed his ambition as a pirate. He got his happy ending. Charlotte Linlin, however, never learned to keep her appetite for ambition in check, and she got her just desserts, along with her brother-in-arms Kaido. Both of these monsters kept their children in chains, and they both tried to use the chains of the celestial dragons to control the will of those beneath them. In other words, both Kaido and Big Mom played the part of would-be God to keep their children loyal to their own dreams, even if it meant sacrificing them. Every child was a sacrificial lamb to the King of Beasts. His very own child was nothing more than fodder for the empire he sought to create. This is the extent of what family meant for Kaido. Yamato is a controversial character for many reasons, and it's impossible to talk about Yamato without talking about what makes Yamato so controversial. Yamato is intrinsically attached to the discourse surrounding gender identity and gender ideology. Obviously, these are touchy subjects, and they're difficult to deliberate on, but there's something else that makes Yamato controversial. That is, the quality of Yamato's character development. People disagree about whether Yamato is a man or a woman, and about whether Yamato is a well-written or poorly written character. I believe that Yamato is widely misunderstood on both counts. Before I continue, there's something to be said about the issue of preferred pronouns. Very simply, I don't believe that any one set of pronouns for Yamato is necessarily correct. I think it's up to the audience to interpret how Yamato expresses her or his or their gender identity. I personally call Yamato a she. If your respect for her characterization leads you to call Yamato by other pronouns, I think that's fine. Yamato's gender identity on its own is fairly bizarre because she doesn't have one. Unlike Kikunojo, who calls herself a woman at heart, Yamato doesn't ever refer to her own gender, at least not directly. She calls herself Kozuki Oden because to her, that's who she is. Kozuki Oden is her identity. It's not that she necessarily identifies with manhood, but rather, Yamato's embodiment of masculinity is partly a side effect of her lifelong commitment to inheriting Oden's identity. And this inheritance of identity gives Yamato the initial appearance that she has no actual identity of her own. To many fans, she seemed like a cardboard cutout of a character. In fact, many fans had anticipated that Yamato would get her chance to develop an identity of her own after Kaido's defeat by joining the Straw Hats. But, as it turns out, Yamato ultimately chose to remain in Wano, a decision which left people disappointed for the same reason that Wano Act 3 left people disappointed. It wasn't finished. I see this criticism often with regard to the Onigashima arc. Fans continue to notice the loose ends and unanswered questions, like what was Shanks doing near Wano? What's going on with Marco? How did the Payback War play out, and how has he changed since then? What about the Mink Tribe? Why was Carrot chosen to be their new ruler? And what character motivations does Eustace Kid have? Are the Akazaya 9 happy with Kaido's defeat on its own? Or do they want to continue to pursue Oden's dream of opening up the land of Wano? What do the people of Wano themselves desire? And of course, just who even is Yamato? So many narrative threads were established only to be left alone by the end of the saga. So, was all of this by design? Or did Wano really miss the mark? One of Wano's most recurring narrative motifs is the significance of characters who defy their conventional gender roles. Kikunojo is a man who passes for a woman, and everyone around her regards her as such. Izo is a man who cross-dresses as a geisha, but is still regarded by all as a man. And Yamato is a woman who regards herself as Kozuki Oden, a man. Another recurring motif in Wano is the significance of characters who conceal their identity, or who pretend to be somebody that they're not, and an argument could be made that Kiku, Izo, and Yamato fall under this category as well. In fact, almost every character who allies themselves with the Akazaya samurai uses a false alias. Each Straw Hat varies their name, their clothes, and their hair, and invents a fake job in order to blend in. Yasui and Hyoguro both bide their time pretending to be smaller, more pathetic versions of themselves. Kikunojo varies her name, and Ashura Doji and Denjiro change their names completely. Kinemon, Raizo, and Kanjuro all pretend to be people that they're not, and Hiyori, Sukiyaki, Yamato, and Law wear masks to hide their faces. These two motifs set up two broad ideas about the land of Wano. The concealment of identity is congruent with the duty of the samurai and the ninja, both of whom put aside their natural ego in order to achieve a certain end. The ninja in particular are known for wearing masks that grant them complete secrecy and anonymity in their actions, allowing them to lead two different lives, often two diametrically opposed lives. And the inheritance of a new identity is congruent with the duty of the actor and the performer, who each allow their ego to blossom into the living incarnation of a given fantasy. The land of Wano is full of people who put their hearts on the line as soldiers and artists. Obviously, Kanjuro the traitor is the clearest example. He's a man who conceals his true identity for 20 years whilst performing the role of a samurai. Less obvious is Kinemon, who is one of the strongest of Oden's retainers, but who has no natural talent for acting. Ironically, he was the one who was chosen to play Momonosuke's father. Surrogate parents and found family are common story devices in One Piece, and Wano was written in part to add a layer of commentary on top of these tropes, commentary about these tropes, and this arrived in the form of the character Yamato. Yamato, like Momonosuke, was born to be a prince, to someday rule over the country of Wano. However, unlike Momonosuke, she was a child of Kaido, the king of beasts, and unlike Momonosuke, she was born a girl. Kaido wanted a son to inherit his will to subjugate the people of Wano. He wanted a man who could be strong and brutal, but weaker than himself and completely obedient to his wishes. Instead, Kaido received a daughter. The sacrificial lamb that Kaido idealized never arrived, so he hid his child behind a mask symbolizing the anguish of womanhood, and he buried her under the pressure of manning up to the task of princehood. These were the only meanings that family had for Yamato. These first 8 years of Yamato's life are never shown, which means there's still some room for speculation about how Yamato was conceived, and what her personality was before Oden's death. It could be that some hidden information exists in those void years that completely rearranges Yamato's characterization, but this is anyone's guess. All that's clear is Oden's death inspired Yamato to reject the will of her father. In that moment, the 8-year-old child couldn't help but cry real tears behind the theatrical mask on her head. The tears Yamato shed weren't just for the one who put the lives of 9 men above his own, but also for the one who danced naked in the streets like a fool. After all, Yamato spent 5 years of her childhood seeing Oden only as the foolish lord. For 5 years, Oden allowed himself to be Kaido's puppet, but Yamato wasn't old enough to realize that this was just a performance. Only at his execution did Yamato see Oden's true self for the first time. Only then did Yamato begin to call herself Kozuki Oden. Yamato adopted this identity only after seeing Oden play both the jester and the martyr. Her first impression of Oden had been turned upside down so severely that she could not help but join the onlooking crowd in affirming his identity. Yamato would no longer be able to become Kaido's puppet, because no matter how strongly she might try to play the role that she was given, her true self would eventually emerge. If Oden was never boiled, it would not be Oden. It would be something else. And once the inheritance of Oden's will was passed down, it could never be forgotten. From then on, Yamato was Kozuki Oden. Not just because she said she was, but because she transformed his entire identity into hers. What started as an infatuation developed into a lifelong commitment for her. She found the approval of Oden's peers and learned firsthand the effect he had on people. She found the memories of Oden contained in a logbook drowning in a river, equipped with the legacy of Oden's intentions and with the only existing record of Oden's thoughts and feelings. Yamato became the person who could play Kozuki Oden. Like a method actress, Yamato digested everything that she could find about the man that she was playing to strengthen her resolve as a performer. 20 years of her life were dedicated to studying Oden's identity so that she could make it into her own. Unlike the other actors and performers who appear in Wano, Yamato does not falter or give herself up, because the role she's playing is who she is. Yamato is Kozuki Oden, and yet the things she was born with are never hidden. Yamato does not pretend that she is nothing but Oden, rather Yamato is Oden, who is also known as Yamato. One way of looking at it is that Oden was the one who became Yamato instead of the other way around. There's something incredibly sly about the way that this character has been written. Yamato is someone who became enamored with a hero figure as a child, read the chronicles of that hero's journey, and then resolved to become the hero that they had read about. This is not like any other example of inherited will in One Piece. It isn't that a protege or an apprentice or an heir was entrusted with a legacy. This time, it's a child who observes from afar and then chooses voluntarily to emulate everything about the great person who they love. Essentially, Yamato is a fan of Oden. The same way that you and I are fans of One Piece, Yamato is a parasocial admirer of Kozuki Oden. She was never a part of Oden's story or of the story of One Piece as a whole until she chose to be. The character of Yamato is perhaps one of the greatest examples in fiction of a character who is first and foremost influenced by storytelling. She is a character who had no reason to insert herself into the story of Oden, but did so anyway. She had no personal relationship with the Kozuki clan, but she fought for them with her own life on the line. Even Oden's son, Momonosuke, was swayed by Yamato's conviction. 4 years prior to the reunion between father and son, Yamato confessed to Ace her longing to leave Wano and venture out to sea, but she was thwarted by the handcuffs of the Celestial Dragons. No matter how much of Oden's freedom she saw in the Spade Pirates, Kaido's dominance over her prevented Yamato from escaping with them. The most that she could do for her friend was mourn behind her prisoner's mask and wait for his brother to arrive in the land of Wano with the Pirate King's dream on his back. When Luffy finally did arrive, Yamato hesitated to let him remove her chains, but not because she feared for her own life. No, what Yamato was afraid of was that the handcuffs would not explode, that Kaido's tyrannical gesture would turn out to be nothing but a bluff. If that happened, then Yamato would be saddled with the anxiety that perhaps her father actually did care for her. For Yamato, these handcuffs were just another theatrical mask, which covered up the true face of Kaido. Rather than the irredeemable monster he is, he might merely remain in her eyes a bad father. This is why the moment that Yamato resolved to let Luffy free her is so important. Not only was her life now spared, but her heart was free from her own hatred of Kaido. Luffy had lifted the weight of resentment off of her shoulders so that Yamato could deal with her father like the tyrant king he was. Once unshackled, Yamato is no longer Kaido's child. Male or female, son or daughter, it makes no difference. She is now free to be Kozuki Oden, including everything that Kozuki Oden was. Yamato is free to be Oden the adventurer, Oden the samurai who fights Kaido as an equal, Oden the protector of the country of Wano, and Oden the father of Hiyori and Momonosuke. And with her freedom, the first choice that Yamato makes is to find her son and deliver him from the battlefield, and then to give him the diary that his father kept. Out of all the roles that Kozuki Oden played in life, Yamato chooses to perform the role of being a good father to Momonosuke first. It's ironic that she would do so, considering who Yamato's own father is, but the trauma and abuse that she's only just escaped from has taught her well how a child should be treated. Yamato was raised to be Kaido's sacrificial prince, only to defy him in the extreme by lifting up the life of Momonosuke above her own. Although many people had risked it all for Momonosuke's sake, no one had done it like this. 20 years after his parents died to save him, a complete stranger is willing to devote herself to him and call him a son, and so Momonosuke decides to take on the role of growing up. After all is said and done, the King of Beasts lies defeated in his volcanic grave. The land of Wano is free from the same chains of tyranny that bound Yamato, and the rightful heir is restored to his throne to watch over his country as it recovers. It's the happiest ending that could have been given to the story of Kozuki Oden, yet something happens here which sparked controversy among fans of One Piece. Yamato doesn't run away with the Straw Hat Pirates. Instead, she remains behind in Wano to protect Momonosuke. Rather than chase her dreams of adventure and romance, Yamato prioritizes her newfound fatherhood and her responsibility as guardian deity of Wano. Some have accepted this choice. Some even say that they had anticipated it from the beginning. Some are disappointed by it. Some contend that this choice is out of character for Yamato, and some have even called it a cop-out. A sizable portion of the audience are of the opinion that Yamato should have obviously joined the Straw Hats as a crew member, and this is a sensible expectation to have after witnessing her character development. Her meeting with Ace, her alliance with Luffy, both of these events yield the understanding that Yamato longs for a life of adventure. Oden, the man she strives to become, let his wanderlust carry him to the ends of the sea, and even then he proclaimed that it wasn't enough freedom. If this is what drove Oden, then surely, isn't this what also drives Yamato? Why would she abandon her dreams at the precipice of their fruition? Despite what the people thought when they saw him playing the clown, Oden was never a coward, and he was never a fool. Neither is Yamato. The inheritance that she was given included not only Oden's drives and motivations, but also his memories, his freedom, and his role as a parent. These things belong to Yamato now. The adventures that Whitebeard and Roger shared with Oden now belong to Yamato. She's already visited Skypiea and Fishman Island, even if only in a book. She has already left her wife and 2 children behind for the sake of seeing the last island. She has already returned to an unrecognizable home and been forced to dance naked before her citizens. Oden's negligence, Oden's failures, Oden's sorrow are all hers. She accepted these things when she chose to take on his identity. To Yamato, these curses are a worthy price for attaining everything the world has to offer. But that doesn't mean that she must repeat every single mistake that Oden made. Yamato doesn't have to abandon her children or her kingdom for an adventure that she's already had. Remember the words Luffy spoke to Rayleigh 2 years ago. If any moral can be gleaned from One Piece, it's that true adventure begins at the point where old familiar ground ends. And yet, paradoxically, time and time again, we see revealed that Luffy has revived the successes of the past and paralleled each good deed that Gold D. Roger had once done. So Yamato seeks to take on all of the virtues of Kozuki Oden without mindlessly replicating his missteps. The dream of Yamato is to be Oden, not to be only Oden, or to be just a part of Oden, but to be all that Oden was, and then herself. People deeply misunderstand this, because people underestimate the strength of Yamato's conviction. The thirst for adventure and the desire to see the world are only whims of hers. They constituted a fragment of the man that Oden was. Yamato's dream is much larger than that, and so she sensibly makes the choice to approach her vision of the future with moderation. Her freedom gives her the choice to choose the best identity to play and the best pathway forwards. There's another angle to this, however. As I previously said, Yamato is not just an isolated character in One Piece, nor is the Wano saga an isolated story. Wano is a narrative frame. Upon it is Yamato, who is the manifestation of commentary on the themes of One Piece. Yamato is the performer who plays the character of Oden, and Wano is her stage. But Yamato started out as the audience member, the fan who watched her idol perform, read his autobiography, and then volunteered herself to follow in his footsteps. That's where the commentary is. What Yamato's character is meant to communicate is proper audience etiquette. Specifically, she represents the ideal response to inspiration. Each action and choice that comprises her character development is an example of what any fan of anything should strive for. Let yourself be moved, and then share the joy of stories with the world. Don't just mimic and recite what you have seen before, but embody it completely and expand what that story means. Yamato proves her capability to expand her meaning of family, because Yamato is not just Kozuki Oden. She is all of Kozuki Oden and then some. She is the evolution of Oden's will. As One Piece enters its final saga, the grand epic continues to grow in size and scope. It continues to spread its sphere of influence over our world, and it continues to bridge the gap between fiction and reality. The basic lessons have already been taught long ago. Now it's time for the students to grow up and carry that story with them into the world. There isn't time anymore to spill out the obvious in every single choice or interaction that a character makes. It's on you and me now to understand for ourselves the reason why, and to integrate these stories into our own identities so that we can share the joy. This is the lesson that Yamato continues to learn, and it's the lesson that I think is being placed before us as the audience. Wano took a massive leap towards pushing forth the narrative of One Piece into our world, and the story will only continue to accelerate towards its climax. It's up to us to be a good audience. So there you have it. That was my One Piece video essay. One thing that I think is very interesting about Yamato is, like I said, those first 8 years of her lives, we don't know anything about her. We didn't see any of that. Like, who the hell did Kaido get it on with? Some people say it's Big Mom. It's like, I don't think so, because Big Mom is like so attached to her family. Like, she would keep them on a leash. You know, if Yamato was Big Mom's child, we would know. Big Mom would not be hiding that from anyone unless there was a huge ulterior motive. And that's possible. There's so much missing information about, who Kaido is, what his background was, the kind of person he was before the God Valley incident, and how he developed after that. Literally decades worth of character development for Kaido that is a complete blind spot for us. I think it's difficult to decipher what's going on with Yamato without that. What I think is the case is I think Yamato was developed to be a certain type of character. I think Yamato was developed to be an audience surrogate who represents like I said, the proper response to inspiration. So it doesn't matter where Yamato came from, because ultimately she came from our world. I think one of the reasons why her background is left ambiguous is because any of us could be Yamato, And the 5 years that she was watching Kozuki Oden playing the fool, that's us watching, One Piece, or watching whatever it is that inspires us. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, or whatever.